Hey everyone, this is James from Italian Poliziotteschi and Jolly Reviews. Today I will be reviewing a film, and that film is called Kidnapped, Rabid Dogs. So this is a Poliziotteschi done by a Jolly director. This film is sometimes classified as horror. I think it certainly borders on, it certainly has exploitation elements, but I think this is far more of a Eurocrime Poliziotteschi film than a horror film. And I think part of that is because this is one of those done by Mario Bava, who is certainly far more associated with the horror and jolly genres than he is with Eurocrime. So similar to Contraband, this film is that rare one done by a more of a horror director in a different genre. And those are fun. I like Contraband quite a bit, and I think this is also a very good film. But we'll get into that in just a second. So the synopsis is really simple. It's a group of robbers take several hostages and hijack a car to escape the police. I actually first saw this when I was first getting into Eurocrime and Poliziotteschi films. Funnily enough, it was also sort of my introduction to Mario Bava, which is interesting because it's very interesting and peculiar and different than most of his work. But I think watching this with a little bit more distance removed from that viewing too, it's a film that stands out in the Eurocrime Poliziotteschi genre overall as well. It's one that I think lingers in the brain and definitely stands out. Partly, I'll get into the reasons why, but I think partly for some of the really, really sleazy, memorable performances that we have here that are really well captured, and partly because it really works against sort of like what we would expect from a Mario Bava film too. Should and why to watch this film? I think you absolutely should watch this film. I think if you are a Poliziotteschi fan and into grindhouse cinema in general, I think you will really enjoy this film. I think it's an incredibly well cast. Again, a very simple story, but very well told. And it's one of those that's just like a tight, nice little grindhouse thriller that just takes place in a very confined setting and things like that, and just really well done. And I love films like that that really can explore the different characters and the psychological aspects, and it generates a ton of tension and a ton of interesting dynamics from just very few resources. So even though it's not really what we think of as kind of like the Mario Bava film in terms of like really rich colors or gothic horror sets or anything like that, it does have the elements of him generating something out of like just a couple, he's like almost a magician with the film in terms of just like generating feelings and tension and things like that out of just a couple very, very basic settings and characters and whatnot. Definitely unusual in the Poliziotteschi industry, like genre as well. It comes out just a couple of years before Hitchhike, which I think is maybe the most comparable film to this, another film which I really, really like. That's Franco Nero and David Hess in a car thriller there. And this film is interesting too because it has a very troubled history. You can read more about that. I'm not going to get too deep into that, but basically the producer died before the film was completed, and so this film really wasn't seen until after Bava's death a few years later. So seen, I think, in the first time in the 90s. There's also a bazillion different versions. I watched the Kidnapped version. A lot of people like the Rabid Dogs version, but Kidnapped is what was easy to find on Canopy, which you can access with a library system if you're here in the States, or Tubi. I think they both had the same version from what I could tell too. So let's get into the film a bit. One thing that I think, now that I have kind of gone through my Eurocrime Poliziotteschi deep dive years ago and coming back to them, and I still watch them pretty regularly, but not like every day, I think the aspects that really stand out are that this film goes hard. It's cruel, it's mean-spirited, it's very grindhouse in that way. That if you are seeing these films every day, you kind of get a little bit numb to it. Coming back to this, I'm like, damn, this film goes really hard just from kind of the get-go. One of the lead robbers is named Blade, and we see him like stab a woman. They're killing policemen right in the first few minutes of the film. So it's definitely Mario Bava keeping with the trends. This film would never be mistaken for a film earlier in his career in like the 50s or 60s or something like that. This is pure 70s exploitation. That being said, sort of like, to continue that train of thought, I feel like similar to Bay of Blood, this is him keeping with the times and keeping with the trends. I love the results of Bay of Blood, of him sort of updating that, body count, jolly formula that he first came up with, Blood and the Black Lace. And this one feels him like kind of going into a little bit more of a different direction. If you watching this very close to Blood and Black Lace, which I just saw earlier this week as well, it's interesting because again, the strengths of the films are completely different. A lot of the Bava pleasures of Blood and Black Lace are the visual aspects that he's able to get, the incredibly vivid colors and things like that. This film, on the other hand, is all taking place in kind of this one small, sweaty car that is overstuffed with passengers. One of the passengers is 6'9" George Eastman, famous for his horror work, Anthropophagus, writer, director. So it has a completely different feel than kind of like the more petite, very beautiful models that you have in that film. And this film also has a lot of really, really great kind of narrative character work that is done as well. All of the characters are established as pretty distinct. You have 32. We find out why he's called 32 later, who is George Eastman. We have Blade, who has a blade. We have the Doctore, who is the doctor, who supposedly has, is sort of the brains behind the operation. Those three could all come out of a Western, too. They feel very much kind of displaced from there. A genre that Mario Bava did a little bit work in, too. And then you have kind of Ricardo, who is the middle-aged character who is wearing a suit, who ends up getting kidnapped with, we are spoiling this film, with what we think is his son at the time. And so... So, yeah, the character work, everyone is really, really well established. And, of course, there's Leah Lander, who ended up saving the film, playing the woman, who kind of has the most thankless role of them, where she's really, really terrorized. She has to do some pretty gross, disgusting things in the film, too, in order to keep surviving it. But she's very good as just playing kind of like the one of the ultimate victims of the film. And so, as you can sort of guess from this, how I have not said, like, this is a Fabio Testi film or a Franco Nero film. This is a film that doesn't really have, like, one big star. But the characters are also well-drawn and well-acted, which I would give Bava some credit to for sure. But I think the actors themselves are just really, really well-cast, and they all perform very well. I think if you're going to have problems with anyone, I've heard some people dislike the George Eastman performance. I kind of disagree. I actually really like it. I think it's one of the most effective performances up there. When I kind of revisited this film just this past week, it was the one performance I really, really remembered. And I just remember him getting like very kind of horned up throughout the film. And it's a really, really physical, sweaty role. He's definitely dialing it up at bits. But, I think if you are... I don't come to Eurocrime films for its subtlety. So I like it when they're going a little bit over the top. And I think it's definitely one of kind of like the, one of the big villain roles that people are going to remember from this genre period. I think it's really well done. I think there's a lot of tension generated just from the different character dynamics. The different dynamics between the three robbers who are in the car is really well established too, where we have like the doctor who is a little bit more of the established one, the brains behind it, and then Blade and Eastman are both kind of drawn very distinctly as well. So them trying to navigate the different kind of character dynamics between the three of them, while they have like these different bystanders who also don't necessarily know each other there. I think it's really, really good. And the whole time it's just occurring in this very small European car while they are trying to escape. And another thing I like a lot is the different side characters that add quite a lot of color to this. If you think about it, all of the side characters here have something kind of pretty distinct. We have, like, of course, the person they pick up that talks way too much. We have the gas station attendant who like initially doesn't let them in. We have them accidentally hitting the bumper, and a guy that's like overly aggressive in a very Italian manner to them. So it's a lot of fun, and it's very interesting, and it's very good at generating tension from kind of like these small different wrenches that get tossed into them. And you can tell that these robbers really don't have necessarily a great plan at all. It's also all takes place during this very hot Italian summer. There are constant references to the heat. We can also just physically see all of the characters getting really, really sweaty. And, one of the sports that I like to follow and I'm a fan of is basketball. And those guys are huge. You have some George Eastman-sized humans in there. And you just see how fast those guys sweat. It's like those guys could be playing basketball for 1 minute, which is basically just running up and down the court maybe once or twice. And those guys just have like sweat on their heads, even if they're bald or whatever. And so you can just imagine how sweaty and how nasty that car felt with someone like George Eastman, who is huge. And I think big people just sweat way more. So you just see him, you can almost smell his presence there. When we actually see Eastman in the car, he looks massive. When he gets out of the car, for some reason, he feels even more massive. The two instances that he eventually gets out of the car, one is kind of this cornfield sweat that we have, and the other is when they go into a gas station with Ricardo, the middle-aged character taken hostage. We really feel his physical presence where he's chasing Leah Lander's character through the field. We see him in the gas station where him and Ricardo are mistaken for kind of homosexual characters. We see how big he is compared to him, and it's just an incredible physical performance. He's in a tank top, so I think he's really, really wonderful. And even when he actually gets killed, in kind of like a very morose twist, they have to keep the body in the car and pretend that he's alive. So George Eastman does quite a lot of dead acting in them, and it's just a huge presence in this very, very small car. So I love that. The other casting that I really wanted to highlight, everyone's good, but I think this is the other kind of big notable one, is Ricardo Cucciola. He's cast this way a couple times. I forget exactly what the one was. It came out in the Arrow box set. But he gives off this presence as this very kind of normal, maybe distinguished even, middle-aged professional. Definitely not lower class, maybe middle upper class sort of person, like dressed in a suit and tie, very respectable. And so casting him as like a kidnapper that's potentially even worse than these people is really, really smart, where he ends up being the kidnapper that kidnapped the boy, and he never reveals exactly what happened until the very, very explosive conclusion. And so he's almost even more terrible character than these guys, even though he presents himself well. It's a really, really delicious, very ironic, very Bava-ish twist that they put to the very end. And I love how this just really wraps up, too, with that character. But the whole time, he gives off this thing as kind of this very milquetoast, very ordinary guy. So I think that part works excellently as well. The Blade Doctor, of course, both good too, and Leah Lander's role. Thank you to her for saving the film. I think it's, it's thankless, but I think she does a very, very good job. She has to get chased by George Eastman and tossed around quite a bit. So definitely kind of what ends up happening to her feels the most kind of Last House on the Left-ish of them. So definitely a film that's not afraid to go to very, very dark lengths there. Who won the film? I would love to give this to George Eastman, but I just gravitate too much towards the director, so I really, really like this film, so I'm going to give it to Mario Bava. Rating 8.5. I think for double feature, this film is pretty hard-hitting and pretty heavy, so I would select something that is also, Eurocrime, also, but perhaps a little bit more fun. I almost chose a Castellari film, but I think something like The Italian Connection from Fernando De Leo, which just came out a couple of years earlier, which is, for me at least, for my money, one of the most fun Eurocrime polizioteschi that you can watch, and definitely one of the more rewatchable ones. I would pair that with this, just because I think something like this and Hitchhike is leaning a little bit too much in towards the pure sleaze end. So yeah, there you have it. That wraps up my review of Kidnapped, or Rabid Dogs. Highly recommend people go check this film out. I really should buy that Arrow set that has both the versions there. I think one criticism that I do have of the film, I missed this earlier, is the Cipriani score. I do like it. I think this is one of those where if they had actually finished the film, they could have honed it and made it a little bit better. I think it's kind of like a B- score, but considering the output that the Italians were doing at the time in terms of scores, I think it could have been a lot better. I might be in the minority in that, but that's kind of how I feel. So thank you everyone for tuning in. I will see you all next time. Cheers.